Hello everyone. Welcome to the Marvin Pictures, and today I thought to make a video on the Osage murders, the true story behind the killers of the Flower Moon. This story is so dark, and still there are many explanations to be made for such brutal activities happen to Osage family, and I eagerly waiting how Martin Scorsese directs the film based on the book Killers of the Flower Moon, and with the leading actors, Robert De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio. This story revolves around Osage murders, and the birth of the FBI. So fasten your seatbelts, this is going to be so dark and hurting. And the story goes on in this way. In the early 1920s, the Osage tribe in Oklahoma found themselves in a remarkable position. Like many other Native American tribes, they had been forced off their land during the Indian Wars of the previous century, and sent to live on a reservation in an area that seemingly provided nothing of real value. However, the Osage negotiated with the U.S. government over their tribal lands, and secured an agreement that granted them the rights to any minerals, including oil, gas, and coal, found on the land. Despite the expectation that there would not be anything useful, a massive amount of oil was discovered on their land, making the Osage incredibly wealthy. They leased the land to white people to extract the oil, and the money was distributed to all members of the tribe, allowing them to enjoy a high standard of living in sharp contrast to other Native American tribes. However, most Osage tribe members were considered legally incapable of handling such a large amount of money due to the perception that they were ignorant Indians. As a result, they were required to have someone, often a white man, oversee their finances. While some overseers were exploitative, there were also white allies of the Osage who were considered protectors of their financial interests. One of these allies was William Hale, who donated large amounts of money to schools and the local hospital, and was a positive influence on the community. Despite the success of the Osage, there was a dark side to their newfound wealth. In the midst of this prosperity, a series of murders took place among the Osage, including Anna Brown, a young woman recently divorced from her white husband. Anna, a member of the Osage tribe, enjoyed her share of the oil money and lived the life of a quintessential flapper. She danced all night at parties, visited clubs, and developed a taste for bootleg liquor. Although older tribe members looked down on her lifestyle, it seemed to do little harm. In May 1921, Anna went missing, and her family hoped she had gone on an extended dancing and drinking binge. However, their hope faded when her badly decomposed body was discovered near a creek. She had been shot execution style in the back of the head with a small firearm from above. The only evidence found at the scene was a bottle that likely contained illegal alcohol, and 2 sets of tire tracks. Anna's disappearance was the beginning of a string of mysterious murders that rocked the Osage tribe. The killings included 2 of Anna's sisters, Mollie and Rita, and her mother Lizzie, who died less than 2 months after Anna. Many thought Lizzie died of heartbreak. The murders led to an investigation called the Osage Reign of Terror, which was complicated by the failure of local law enforcement and politicians. Despite this, W. Vaughan, a local attorney and citizen, was determined to solve the case and had been secretly collecting evidence. He was summoned to the bedside of a dying Osage man who was poisoned and told Vaughan everything he knew. Vaughan wrote down what the man said and was satisfied that it was a significant breakthrough in the case. However, after Vaughan hopped on the next train back, he was never seen again. His body was found beside the railway tracks 2 days later, and his secret stash of evidence had been cleared out. Despite the investigation, 24 Osage tribe members and a few white men who tried to help them or had inside information were killed. It was later revealed that Anna Brown was pregnant at the time of her death. The Osage community was in a state of widespread terror as people were dying suddenly and without explanation, while the killer or killers seemed to have an all-knowing presence, hunting down anyone who knew something and leaving no detectable trace. Local authorities had been scared into inaction by multiple threatening anonymous messages, and the situation had spiraled out of control. Realizing that they needed more than just local or state support, the Osage eventually turned to the relatively new Bureau of Investigation, which later became the Federal Bureau of Investigation, for assistance. The Osage murders were so widespread that they caught the attention of J. Edgar Hoover himself. Tom White, a perceptive former Texas Ranger, was the lead investigator on the case. Under his leadership, Progress was made and undercover agents were employed to befriend suspects and gather information. White became suspicious when the bullet that killed Anna Brown was never found, despite there being no exit wound. He discovered that the local doctors, the Shawn brothers, had purposely disposed of the evidence. This led to a wider investigation of the extensive corruption surrounding Osage finances, uncovering judges who appointed their supporters as overseers of Osage tribe members as a reward. White followed a trail of insurance policies and financial documents, leading to William Hale, known as the Friend of the Osage. It was soon discovered that the motive for the murders was the Osage's wealth. Hale had been funneling individual tribe members' shares of the Osage Mineral Trust to Mollie Burkhart's family. Ernest Burkhart, Hale's nephew and Mollie's husband, was the overseer of Mollie's finances. If Mollie died, all of the accumulated money would go straight to him. White had to gather enough evidence to take down Hale and his minions, including Ernest. He talked with local criminals who had collaborated with Hale for some of the murders. Young outlaw Dick Gregg was one of them. White also discovered a network of local white men secretly in league with Hale, tipping him off about the activities of others. Hale knew he was getting closer, so he gave away more money to locals, trying to cement his reputation as a friend of the Osage, while plotting more of their murders. Bert Lawson, a criminal in jail, claimed to have information about the Smith murders, implicating Ernest Burkhart directly. Mollie Burkhart had become reclusive, which Ernest initially attributed to her worsening diabetes. However, it soon became clear that there was more to her seclusion. A local priest became concerned when Mollie, an avid churchgoer, stopped attending services and heard rumors that she was being held against her will. Mollie secretly messaged the priest, expressing her belief that someone was trying to poison her. The priest was aware that poisoned liquor had been used in previous murders and was able to send a secret message back to Mollie advising her not to drink any liquor offered to her. Despite this warning, her condition continued to worsen, and there were suspicions that the insulin shots she was receiving from local doctors, including the Shawn brothers, might be poisoned. The worried priest broke the convention of secrecy between priest and parishioner and divulged the information to White. White acted swiftly and secured warrants for the arrest of Hale and Burkhart, despite not having direct evidence. However, to prove their guilt, White's team desperately needed more evidence. Blackie Thompson, another local criminal who was serving time for murdering a police officer, provided more reliable evidence. He told Wyatt that Hale and Burkhart had approached him about killing Bill and Rita Smith. Ernest Burkhart was singled out for questioning rather than Hale, as Ernest was more likely to crack under pressure. Thompson was brought to meet Burkhart, and after this meeting, Burkhart confessed. He confirmed that Lawson had been lying, and John Ramsey was involved in the conspiracy, possibly as the gunman of Henry Roan and other murderers. Mollie Burkhart had been transferred to a hospital, and her health rapidly improved, adding more fuel to the theory that she was being poisoned through her insulin treatment. Despite these developments, the trial faced many hurdles. William Hale had many connections among locals and government officials. Due to his behind-the-scenes meddling, it was decided that the case would be tried by the state of Oklahoma, where he had more influence, rather than a federal court, which would normally have applied to tribal lands. Hale's attorney successfully coerced Ernest into delaying his testimony for one day, and the next time he took the stand, he retracted his statements against Hale, claiming he was coerced and tortured by White and his agents. This left White's best witness as Kelsey Morrison, a local criminal whose loyalty had flip-flopped between the federal agents and Hale. Despite this, Morrison testified against Hale, but his history didn't make him a very reliable key witness. However, just when things were looking bad for the prosecution, Ernest Burkhart came around again. Burkhart, Hale's nephew and one of the conspirators in the murders, made a surprising move by secretly speaking with the prosecuting attorney and switching from a not guilty to a guilty plea. He also hired his own lawyer and confirmed that he had not been coerced or abused by Hale or Ramsey. However, the Supreme Court later determined that the murder of Henry Roan occurred on tribal lands, resulting in the case being sent to a federal court where Hale had far less power. Despite Burkhart being sentenced to life in prison with hard labor, he reportedly appeared relieved as if he had finally purged the guilty demons from his conscience. During the trial, reports surfaced that at least one juror had been bribed and that one witness had been threatened with death by Hale's defense attorney, resulting in the judge dismissing the jury and a new one being assembled. These reports were later confirmed, but the defense attorney was not charged with obstruction of justice to avoid delaying the current trial against Hale and Ramsey. Although there were concerns that an all-white jury would not care about the murder of Indians, the new jury found Hale and Ramsey guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced them to life in prison instead of execution. The next year, the trial for Anna Brown's murder took place, and Ernest's brother Brian was given immunity to testify against Kelsey Morrison, who had switched his loyalty to Hale. Brian testified that he had helped get Anna drunk and held her in place while Morrison shot her. Although not all of the culprits were tried for all of the victims' murders, they had been caught and would be punished. Despite all the bumps in the road during the investigation and the prejudice many had towards Native Americans, the federal justice system had not completely failed this time. In the end, the Osage could no longer be rich without working, and the depletion of their oil led to the abandonment or near abandonment of many Oklahoma boom towns during the Great Depression. The Osage community found themselves unable to maintain their wealth without putting in the effort to work for it. It is a bitter irony that they were killed for their riches, only for the culprits to be brought to justice and their wealth to dissipate. Their deaths now seem senseless, as they were not even for the selfish pursuit of material wealth. Before concluding the video, it is worth exploring the aftermath of the main players in this case. Mollie Burkhart, the most tormented person in the story, experienced unimaginable levels of pain. Her last two siblings were brutally murdered. Her mother passed away soon after, and her husband committed the ultimate betrayal. During the trials, her 4-year-old daughter also died. After Ernest's admission that he had assisted in the murder plot, Mollie divorced him, and her surviving children were forever stigmatized for their relation to the hated Ernest. However, Mollie eventually found happiness with another man and became competent in managing her finances and a full American citizen. Tom White, who had investigated the Osage murders, left the Bureau of Investigation and became the warden of Leavenworth Prison, where he encountered William Hale, one of the convicted murderers. In 1931, White was nearly killed by rioting prisoners who kidnapped and shot him. Although he survived, he was left with a limp left arm for the rest of his life. In later years, he became the warden of another prison. He passed away in 1971 at the age of 90. Surprisingly, William Hale, the main culprit, was released from Leavenworth Prison in 1947 after serving 20 years, owing to his good behavior and exemplary conduct. Although he was not allowed to go back to Oklahoma, he lived freely for over a decade and passed away in 1962 at the age of 87. Hale even referred to himself as a true friend of the Osage people while in prison and never admitted to his involvement in the killings. Ernest Burkhart, another important figure in the story, was released from prison in 1937 but sent back for robbing an Osage home. He was released again in 1959 and finally obtained an official pardon from the state of Oklahoma in 1965, which allowed him to return to Osage County. However, he lived a destitute life in a trailer until he passed away in 1986 at the age of 94. Ernest's brother, Brian Burkhart, who also assisted in at least one of the murders, died in 1985 at the age of 86. There is no information available about John Ramsey after he was paroled in 1947. Both Dick Gregg and Blackie Thompson, the outlaws who were involved in the case, were killed by law enforcement officers. Although many in the Osage Nation were outraged that Hale, Burkhart, and Ramsey did not serve their life sentences, they were released and believed that justice had not been served. Despite the heinous nature of the Osage murders, the case has largely been forgotten outside of the Osage community for over a century. However, the book, Killers of the Flower Moon, by David Grann has sparked renewed interest in the case, and a movie adaptation is currently being made, directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro. Despite the disturbing content, the story needs to be told, and there are still many unanswered questions in the case, particularly regarding the other murders that went unsolved and whether they were related to William Hale's scheme. Although the full extent of his plot may never be known, the fact remains that he was a cold-blooded murderer who took the lives of innocent people for their money. The total number of victims from the Hale or other incidents remains uncertain, as any deaths with even the slightest hint of suspicion could potentially be linked to the case. This means that sudden, unexpected, or mysterious deaths in the area could be included in the count, but it may now be too late to connect them. Furthermore, there may be other victims that have never been discovered. If some of the murders are unrelated to the Hale incident, it would be a testament to the dark depths of human nature and the trouble that great wealth can bring. The elders of the tribe may have been right to be suspicious, as the desire to accumulate wealth without working had driven people to do terrible things. If it weren't for the oil and the money, perhaps none of this would have happened to the Osage people. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I highly recommend David Grant's book, Killers of the Flower Moon. It is a rare instance of a well-researched history book that is also a page-turner. The author strikes a perfect balance in his writing. I am excited about the upcoming movie adaptation, and I hope you are too. And, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for more interesting content on films, the cinema. Also, follow me on Instagram. I will leave link below in description. You guys can also connect me there. Until then, see you guys in the next one.